What's happening? Ben Albert here. You're about to see a private Q&A with Matthew Dix. He's been on the show 2 times, greatest storyteller in the world. Link to those two episodes is in the description. But this is a private Q&A with my exclusive collective, GrowGetters Only. Go to growgettersonly.com if you want to just come in for a month or DM me. You can be my guest. I'll let you in for free. But go to growgettersonly.com if you want to meet some of the guests from this very podcast. And this is an Ask Me Anything with Matthew Dix from that group. Enjoy.
You're listening to the Real Business Connections Network.
Real Business Connections Network.
Powered by Balbert Marketing, LLC. Subscribe now and check us out at realbusinessconnections.com. Enjoy the show.
As everyone knows, we have a guest today, Matthew Dix. You've won a lot of Moth GrandSLAM story competitions. Do you know what the total number is as of today?
I've won 62 slams and 9 championships. I'm actually going tonight to tell a brand new story.
So 62 slams, 9 national championships. We're being braggadocious. What's second in line? Like, what's the second most someone's won?
I don't know. It used to be, I've been doing it a long time. Longevity plays a role here, right? So when I started doing it, the number was 20 and they told me it couldn't be beaten. So I got to 21 and then my friend said, "Are you done?" And I said, "No, I'm going to double it because I'm a terrible human being." And then when I doubled it, they said, "Are you done?" And I said, "No." Well, now I'm going to go to 100 because I'm the worst person you've ever met in your life. So I've been working towards 100 ever since.
And these are storytelling competitions, so it's fair to say that you've dedicated much of your life to storytelling.
Well, I wouldn't say much of my life because I only started doing competitions like this in 2011, which feels like yesterday, but I acknowledge is a long time. But I've been telling stories in one form or another for a very long time. I didn't recognize that until my wife pointed it out to me, as she is wont to do. I used to think I stumbled upon something in 2011 that I happened to be good at. And then she heard me say that once and threw something at me and told me to wake up and realize the course of my life and what it has meant. And she was correct, of course.
You just had a book come out, storytelling in more business context. You're the storytelling pro. Where should this conversation begin? Do you want to talk about the book or provide us a little bit of background so we can get to know you a little bit better, Matt?
Well, my win today is I did my 200th ride on my indoor bike. And when you do your 200th ride, you get an email from iFit that says, in my case, "You're unstoppable." That was the subject line of the email. So I took a screenshot of that, "You're unstoppable," and I sent it to my friend Jenny, who's a storyteller who finds me insufferable. And so I sent her that screenshot and I said, "Look, even iFit thinks I'm amazing. Isn't that great?" As a means of making her angry. And I told her, "I know this will make you mad." And it did. And then she sent me a text back saying she actually listened to my text in the car with her daughter. And now her daughter thinks I'm also insufferable. And all of this is going to be great because I'll eventually write about it, because it occurred to me as a storyteller, I'm always looking to find new things to say, which is ultimately what we have to do if we want to be entertaining. But it made me realize that we have different types of friends in the world. Some of them are sort of those friends that you're gentle with. But I think the best friends you can have are the ones who you can throw things at. In the same way my wife threw something at me to make me wake up, Jenny is one of my closest friends because we want to make each other's lives so difficult in a loving way. So I will be writing about that and perhaps telling a story about it. But that is what I do. I essentially move through my life constantly looking for things to say that might be of interest to people at all times. In this case, with my book, I published Storyworthy in 2017, a book that would help human beings tell better stories. And the business world went and found that book, which was not written for them, but they managed to fit sort of a square peg into a round hole. And that's why I get to work with companies like Google and Apple and Microsoft these days, because they found that book and said, "He can help us." I didn't really think I could at the time, to be honest with you. And every day the phone rings with some new weird opportunity that I would never expect. I work with the FBI now. I help their hostage negotiation unit learn how to tell better stories so that if someone is barricaded behind a door with a person and they want that person to make a good choice and not a terrible choice, telling stories turns out to be a highly effective way to get people to make a better choice and feel more connected to the people who they're talking to. So none of these things I ever expected. I thought I would be a person who stood on stages and tell stories. But because the business world found my book and sort of invited me into their world and I began working with them, I then wrote StorySell, which came out this year, which is the book that is designed to help actual business people use storytelling for marketing, branding, sales, strategy, leadership, all the things that I help people with every day. So I think it's fairly helpful. I've taken a decade of working in corporate America and small business America and universities and religious institutions and the FBI and many, many others, and incorporated all of that into the book, which I think will probably be helpful to people.
So we have a good foundation to kick this off. I want people to raise their virtual hand or put something in the chat if they have a question. But really, I guess to get this started is, in a business context, where do these stories come from?
Well, I tell people that storytelling is storytelling, meaning that the same strategies that a filmmaker uses or a showrunner uses or a playwright uses or a novelist, I write novels, all of those strategies are the same strategies that we use in business stories. We use suspense and stakes and surprise and humor and all of the things that make a story great. There is no business storytelling and then personal storytelling and then cinema storytelling. It's all the same strategies deployed on a different canvas each time. And the best storytellers who I work with, or the best business people, are what I call brick builders. I say I've got two different kinds of companies I work with. I got Band-Aid people, which is, Matt, we have added a boring feature to our otherwise boring platform. Can you please come in and help us sell that more effectively than we're doing right now? So that means I parachute into a company. I put a Band-Aid on a problem. I give them a story that they can use. I help them with their strategy. We build an advertising campaign. But when it's done, I leave. They're no better at storytelling. I've essentially just done the work for them. And I'm happy to do it because I collect my paycheck and I walk away. But my best clients are the ones that understand that the stories that we have within us, our life experiences, those are stories that are highly effective in business when we learn how to use them. So my best clients are brick builders, meaning they just want to become better storytellers because they understand that if they learn how to tell a better story to their spouse or their kids or their neighbors, they're going to tell a better story in business as well. Just learning how to tell great stories will get you to where you want to go. And the truth is, you have to do it that way because the best way to become a good storyteller is to tell lots of stories. And there's only so many business stories that you can tell. You're only producing so many products or so many services, or you have only so many customers to talk to. But we have a multitude of stories in our lives to tell. And so if we're practicing in our personal life, telling stories about ourselves and the people around us, then when it comes time to, marketing your widget and looking for a story to help market the widget, you're going to be a better storyteller as a result. I remind people all the time, I started as a storyteller who stood on stages and made people laugh and cry. And the business world said, we'll take that and we'll use it to help sell our stuff, right? So it wasn't that I went into the business world as a brander, marketer, strategist. I went into the business world as a guy who told amusing, heartfelt stories and managed to take all the strategies that I understand and just apply them to Slack or Microsoft Office or, Amazon contracts or, the engineering company down the road, all of these things. So learning how to tell personal stories will both be great content for your business and great practice for what you need to do.
Give us an example of one of those stories that you were able to draw out of one of these clients.
Sure. Well, usually what they do is they draw my story and then they steal it from me, which happens a lot. I was Amazon, for example. I was working with a contract manager at Amazon. He was going to be delivering sort of a 90-minute speech, we'll say, to all of his people, to about 120 people in his division. Amazon is taking their design and manufacturing of many of their products and sort of sending them to other companies to have the other companies do their design and manufacturing for them. So as contract managers, they have realized that their contracts need to be far more specific than they used to be. So specificity was really important. And he wanted to tell stories, to his credit, in his talk. So he said, how are we going to put specificity into my talk in a way that contains stories and things like that? So I told him, I said, when I go to a restaurant, my problem in life is that for some reason, restaurants put pickles on plates without any warning. So you order a hot dog and some fries, and without any announcement, they just put an arbitrary pickle on the plate as well. And I hate pickles. I can't stand them. And so I find myself in life with this food item that I cannot stand on my plate all the damn time. And the problem with pickles is they infect everything. So if you get a pickle next to your hot dog now tastes like a pickle, right? And the French fries taste like a pickle. It ruins everything. And so when I go into a restaurant, no matter what I'm ordering, I say, and by the way, if you're going to arbitrarily put a pickle on the plate, please don't, because I can't stand them. I was in a restaurant like 2 weeks ago and I ordered clam chowder. And I said to the server, and by the way, if you're going to put a pickle on the plate, please don't. And she said, why would we put a pickle with clam chowder? And I said, I don't know. Why would you put it with a hot dog? Why do you put it with a hamburger? Why do I find pickles next to fish and chips? Like, I don't know what your thinking is. I'm just letting you know not to do it. It makes my wife crazy. She was like, stop doing that. It's crazy. But the point is, I'm being exceedingly specific because I need to be in order to get exactly what I want. So I told the guy, that's the story I would tell. And then I would pivot and say, and so that's how we have to approach contracts now here at Amazon. And so I said to him, what do you have in your life that you're exceedingly specific about? And he said, I'm just going to use your pickle story. And I said, do you like pickles? And he said, I don't like them anymore. It's too good of a story. I'm going to use your story. And he used it. They actually use that language now. When he gets a contract on his desk that isn't specific enough, he will say, this has a pickle problem, and he'll send it back. And they'll have to find the pickle essentially and take it out. But the thing that I explained to him too is when we tell stories like that as part of the communication that we're engaged in, what happens is we create advertising in the world that we don't even understand exists. So that the 150 people at that conference, the next time they're in a restaurant and they order a hamburger or a hot dog or whatever, and they get an arbitrary pickle, they're going to think about him. They're going to think about his message. They're going to think about specificity. His message is going to continue to resonate with them every time they go to a restaurant. They're probably going to tell the story to their family or their friends at the dinner table. Hey, look at this pickle, this arbitrary pickle on my plate. I know a guy at work. He taught us about this and how this happens. So it's when we tell a story like that from our lives and we connect it, I call it speaking through adjacency, where we take a story and we marry it to a message that we're trying to send in business. It's so powerful because it both lets people know who we are. We become more human as opposed to what normally happens in business, which is everyone is sort of round, white, and flavorless. They all want to be like everybody else, which is the worst way you should ever want to be. So you get to be an actual human being with thoughts and feelings, and you get to tell an entertaining story and make people laugh, which changes brain chemistry in really deep and significant ways. And then you create memorability. Like you become unforgettable because you're the one who told a story, and that story contains objects that actually exist in the world that will resonate with your audience later on. So that's one of a billion examples I could give you about how we take a personal story, combine it to our business communication, and make it more effective.
If anyone does have questions, feel free to raise. You can click react to raise your virtual hand or physical hand. I see Anne raised hers, so go ahead. And then Darlene.
Yeah. So thank you for coming, Matthew. I appreciate it. And, I've probably heard your stories before if you've won that many times and just didn't realize it as I've been listening to the Moth for a long time. Question on stories in business. Do you typically then start with that message you're trying to tell and then try to find a story that relates to it? Is that the way that you go when it comes to business?
Not always, but that's what I try to get people to do. I do a lot of strong arming and I lose a lot. So oftentimes I have to follow the path of stupidity in order to get them to do what I want. But in the perfect world, yes, I say, can we talk about the theme, meaning, or message that we're trying to send? We identify that theme, meaning, or message. And then I say, let's find some stories that match this theme, meaning, and message. Sometimes it's stories from people in the room. Sometimes it's my stories that they steal from me. Sometimes we find stories in the real world that are also associated with whatever we're trying to do in business. But I try to start there whenever I can. It doesn't always work. A lot of times I say, can we start with theme, meaning, and message? And they say, Matt, we have a broom and we need to sell the broom. Okay. We want people to buy our broom. Can you please help us with the broom? And I say, well, can we think about the theme, meaning? And they're like, no, brooms don't have theme, meaning, and message. And I say, well, actually they do, but, it's hard to tell people. It's hard to tell people that what they've been doing for a very long time is not the most effective way of doing things. This is an example. I was working with a biotech company. We were sending 5 scientists to a conference to talk about the products that they offer, to build leads from the audience members. The company, one of the things they sell is tubes. I don't actually understand what they sell completely, but they sell tubes that are used in some manufacturing process. Their competitors sell one tube, and that tube needs to be retrofitted in order to fit your manufacturing needs. My scientist sells 18 different sizes and types of tubes. They're all a lot more expensive than the competitors, but you get sort of what you want. You don't have to retrofit. So your efficacy and your success in your manufacturing presumably increases. So John is the guy who's going to go to this conference. He's a scientist. He's a legitimate, like nerdy, I like numbers scientist, but I convinced him to not tell any science at the science conference. Instead, what he did is he took the stage and he basically said, every Saturday morning, I go grocery shopping and I have a list from my family because no one can agree on apples. So I stand in front of that enormous table of apples every week. And my son needs like 4 Cosmic Crisps, which what the hell is that? And my daughter needs like 3 Yellow Delicious, which you can never find on the planet. And my wife needs like 4 Macintosh for this reason and 2 Red Delicious for these reasons. And I like Gala. So he says I spend 15 minutes gathering apples, putting them in separate bags. It costs me a fortune. He said, but when I get home, everyone's happy because they get what they want. And then he says, that's what our company believes. We believe you should get what you want. Our competitors say, here's a Macintosh, make it work. I don't care what you're doing with it. I don't care what your kids prefer. I don't care what you prefer. You get a Macintosh and that's it. Make it work. We believe you should have all the apples. That's all he does. He doesn't talk numbers. He doesn't talk science. He gets off the stage. 5 scientists go to the conference. John gets more leads than the other 4 scientists combined. But when I'm facing the vice president of marketing a week later, and she finds out I sent John to the conference and John didn't talk science, instead he told a story about his family and apples, she kind of loses her mind. She says, like, we can't send scientists to scientific conferences and have them not report on our science. And I said, but the purpose of the conference was for you to get leads, and he has more leads than everyone else. And now when he makes those follow-up phone calls, he can report on the science. But what she was really telling me was, I have made it to the vice president of marketing in this very large company doing things a certain way. And this stupid middle-aged white man has walked into my room and done something different as opposed to what we've always done before and challenged my belief structure. And that is not comfortable for me. And I run into that all the time. To her credit, 45 minutes later, she threw papers down on the desk and said, damn it, I think he's right. Right. And then I explained to her the beauty of what John did was, again, everyone goes to the grocery store. Everyone finds themselves standing in front of that table of apples, looking for the apple that they want. Every single time they do it, they're going to be thinking of John and the company that gives them exactly what they want. We've built in advertisement that costs nothing, that resonates over and over again and makes people feel good. But it's hard because not everyone is willing to be different. It is safe to be within the herd, right? It is safe to be round, white, and flavorless. It's great to be forgettable, which is what most people are in business, because most people in business are not very effective. So if you're not going to be effective, at least you should be forgettable. So when people like give a talk and they say, how did I do? I say, well, it's not good, but don't worry. No one's ever going to remember it. So you're not going to come out looking bad. That's the truth in most circumstances. Like you've been probably to enough conferences where you've heard people speak and then you leave the room. You stop at the restroom, you get in your car, and by the time you pull into your driveway, you kind of can't remember anything that was said that day, and you wonder why you were there. And it's mostly because everyone was trying to be like everyone else, instead of telling stories, being amusing, being vulnerable, doing the things that most people are unwilling to do. That is the longest damn answer to your simple question, which is both the effect of having a storyteller on the line and because I cannot answer questions simply. So I apologize. Hopefully it was mildly helpful.
Very helpful.
Okay.
Hi, Matthew. Thank you so much for speaking to us today. I'm so excited. So I have more of a tactical question. So I feel like I have an internal monologue always running through my head and stories and stories and stories. But like tactically, how do you organize that? How do you, as a storyteller, kind of keep that on track and make sure that the stories that are meant to be told get told and dismiss the other things?
Well, I do something called homework for life, which will take me too long to explain to you, but you'll just simply Google the phrase homework for life and you'll be able to watch my TED talk on it. But essentially, it's a way by which I spend my time looking for stories in my everyday life, affording myself the opportunity to think about myself, which is nothing most people do. Storytellers are sort of self-centered in a mildly positive way, meaning we're actually interested in ourselves and who we are and how we've become the person we are today. So the more you can become that type of a person where you're sort of analyzing your life and finding the things that mean something to you, the more tactical you become. Homework for life is essentially a means by doing that, which results for me on a spreadsheet. And my stories are on a spreadsheet. And when I'm telling a story, I'm always thinking about the multiple uses of that story. In the same way, when iFit sends me an email that says you're unstoppable, I think, well, first I can make Jenny mad, and that's going to be great. And actually, this makes me think about how we have different kinds of friendships in our life. And this makes me think about how actually the friendships that I value the most are the ones where I get to poke fun of my friends. Like the meaner I am to a friend, probably the closer I am to a friend. Isn't that interesting? Right. And that all becomes content that will eventually maybe become something. Sometimes it's in business and sometimes it's not, you know, and I'm always thinking along those lines. My son, the other night, he fell into my bedroom because he can't stay on his own 2 feet. He's 12, but he fell into the bedroom. And when he landed on the floor, he found himself looking under my bed. And under the bed, he saw his baseball bat from his first season of Little League. And he pulled it out and said, "Why is this under your bed?" And it's under the bed because I am a vigilant human being who is always assuming he's going to be killed because I've been the victim of horrific crime. And so I have like more preparation than you can begin to imagine in terms of like dealing with the world, including a baseball bat under the bed that's short enough that I can swing in a small space so I can really clobber someone and split their head open if I need to. This is actually my thought process. And I stand there and I think, am I going to tell my 12-year-old son this? Do I tell my 12-year-old son that I have his aluminum baseball bat under my bed because I might need to kill someone someday who breaks into the house? Right. And then I realize, he's 12. He kind of understands probably that there are bad people in the world. So I tell him, I say it's here because if someone ever breaks into the house and I need to kill them, I would like to have a bat in order to begin that process. And Charlie says, "That's good, Dad. Thanks." And he walks away. And I realize as he's walking away, he gets to be a boy. He's like, "Thanks, Dad, for worrying. So I don't have to worry. I'm going to go fall down somewhere else now." Right. And I was thinking of that as a story because I was about to get in the shower. So I get in the shower and I'm thinking, oh, that's going to be a story I can tell someday. And then I thought to myself, oh, I work with a cybersecurity company. And that's a perfect story for a cybersecurity company because basically a cybersecurity company is a company that says, "Hey, we have a baseball under the bat for you so you don't have to worry about it. Like we're going to watch it so that you don't have to watch it," right? Which is essentially what I'm doing for my son. And that would be a funny, appealing, heartfelt story that a cybersecurity company could use or some version of it to basically say, you know how you're worried about people breaking into your house and you have a baseball bat under your bed? We do that in the cyber world. So in the shower, I had all of those thoughts. And then when I came out of the shower, I went over to my homework for life and wrote it down. And then sometimes if I've got a lot of thoughts, I record it on my phone and it's listed under something like on my phone. If we look on that night, I listed it under, I don't know if you can see it, but it says bat under bed, right? That was from 2 nights ago when I said, oh, that bat under the bed story is both a good story and I'm going to use it with my cybersecurity company next week and let them know, hey, maybe we want to use this in some of our marketing, right? Do you guys have a bat under your bed? Hopefully they do. Otherwise, they'll just steal my story again. But whatever, they pay me money for my story, so I'll let them do it. Again, a very long answer to a question I can't even remember anymore. But
No,
hopefully answered it.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Apologies for my lack of brevity. It is the soul of wit, so apparently I lack that wit.
We have a couple questions in the chat. Did you want to unmute and ask them, or I can read them myself?
I will show mercy to your throat, Ben, if it's all right.
Thank you, my friend.
Hey, Matt. I've got Storyworthy somewhere back in the shelf, and I love the book. I bought the new one as well, but I had two questions. I'm sitting on the other end of the planet in India, and my first question to you is, how do I find stories that are relatable if I have to share them across cultures? Like, for example, we don't have baseball bats here. We have a cricket bat or a hockey stick, right? So that's one. The second thing is you often mention that you use stories. Like, for example, you're going to be selling a story to the cybersecurity company. So how do these companies tell these sort of personal stories? Because the story about the baseball bat is yours. But if a suit, not a suit, a spokesperson in the cybersecurity company, if they had to go tell the story, how can they tell your story through their mouthpiece, so to speak, right? So do they take stories of their customers and employees? How does that work?
Sure. I'll answer the second one first.
Sure.
Ideally, what happens is I tell them my baseball bat story, and in a perfect world, they come up with their own story of their own personal vigilance. They think, oh, I don't have a baseball bat, but you know what I do? Like, for example, in my car, I also have a tent and emergency food. Like, I'm crazy, but if they were a person like, I don't have a baseball bat, but I actually keep a tent and a supply of emergency food in my car, I'm like, perfect. That's the same thing. Right. So, in the same way I asked that Amazon manager, what are you overly specific about in your life? Right. I ask the cybersecurity company, where are you overly vigilant in your life? Do you have a baseball bat version of a story? Right. In your case, that might be like, if it's a cricket bat, that's fine. Let's just turn it from a baseball bat to a cricket bat. But ideally, what I'm trying to do is to get them to open their minds to find their own stories so that they can become actual people in front of the people they're talking about, rather than people who are using stories saying like, I know a guy who, which is not as good of a story, right? So I'm trying to get them to do that and sharing my own story. Stories beget stories. So if I tell you the baseball bat story, like probably half the people on this call right now have a vigilance story of their own, either similar to mine or something adjacent to mine, right? So half the people here now go, oh, I have my own version of Matt's story. And that's what I'm hoping for. If you're doing homework for life, you're going to have a lot more of those stories because you're going to be in the active process. I actually had like 7 stories for that Amazon manager on places where I was overly specific in my life. It's not because I'm overly specific as a person, but just because I have a window into my life that most people don't have, because I'm sincerely and religiously and relentlessly obsessed with my life. So I'm always looking at it and drawing content from it. For like, you don't get an email from iFit that says, you're unstoppable, and then decide all these things you can do with a simple email, unless you're a storyteller who's like, hey, what can I do with this? Right. So that's essentially how I live my life and how I want everyone to live their lives. So that's how I try to help companies so they don't have to use my stories, but that it opens their minds to their own stories. In terms of culture, I'm keenly aware of this because I always avoid cultural references whenever I can. So you're never going to hear me say the name of a musician or a book or a movie. I honestly would have assumed baseball bat had enough universal appeal that it would have crossed cultures, but maybe it doesn't. And so that's the curse of knowledge for me, meaning I just assumed that this thing was more ubiquitous than I thought. In terms of cultural references, I might dare to say Taylor Swift, but that's basically the only cultural reference I think that I would dare to make. Like, there's just not that much anymore. In the 1980s, there was only 3 TV shows. Everybody knew everything, right? And in the 1980s, like, there was no rap music because we only allowed white men with guitars to be on the Billboard Top 40. But then weird things happened where everyone got to actually begin speaking their own truth. And now the world has less sort of monoculture. So I avoid all of that. And in order to like sort of cross those boundaries, because I work with Indian companies, I work with Canadian companies, I work with a company in Mexico. I say we're not looking for tangible objects in our stories as much as we're looking for heart and mind. We're looking for vigilance, right? How are you vigilant in your particular location, right? Because that is a universal feeling. In the same way, people who need to be overly specific about things, like it doesn't matter where you live, you probably have something in your life where, listen, my sock drawer is organized by color, and you're not going to give me a hard time about that because it's important to me. Like that, we're all going to have that kind of thing. So I'm looking for, again, theme, meaning, and message, which I think breaks through most cultures because I think we all sort of have those similarities wherever we are. So I'm looking for that kind of a thing. Does that answer your questions?
It does significantly. And if I may be so bold to just ask a follow-up question
Sure.
to the company thing, right?
Yeah.
So let's say I'm representing a certain company and I go on stage and I share a story and that ends up getting me leads. Is that a viable strategy for a company? Because now it's that person and that story and not the company itself. Like there's a bit of a disconnect, right? So how do you, and I swear this is my last question. So
It's all good.
how do you like rationalize these two?
Sure. I tell people that if you are delivering a talk that anyone can deliver, then you might as well not be delivering that talk, right? Because we can have an AI speak your talk for you and we no longer need a human being, right? We don't believe in great ideas. We believe in people who have great ideas or people who want to share great ideas with us. We must actually be human beings. I hate the phrase B2B because that's stupid. There is no business to business. It's H to H. It's human to human. So what I say is we can create a marketing strategy, let's say. I can prep a CEO, or let's say I'm prepping a marketing team to deliver across the globe the same message about the product. There's going to be a spot in every single one of those talks where a person gets to be a person, so they're going to be talking about the same product features and they're going to talk about the pricing and all of that's going to stay the same. But I'm going to teach you how to actually talk about yourself somewhere within that talk, whether it's a big story at the beginning, like Charlie and the baseball bat, or a smaller story where you at least acknowledge that, by the way, I have kids. By the way, I'm married. By the way, I own a boat, right? By the way, I hate soccer, right? Like these are things that we can slip into our speeches very seamlessly if we're willing to be a little strategic and we're willing to share of ourselves. And I believe that's how we're effective. So we can keep the same essential content intact, but allow people to be themselves within that content. If we don't, we can just hire a spokesperson to deliver our content. And we probably should, because we would be better off than strategizing, planning, working with our people, and just having a random human being go stand on the stage and deliver the talk that has been prepared that can be delivered by anyone, right? So it's got to be you when you're speaking, or nobody really cares. So you've got to make it you in some way. And your bio doesn't count. Barack Obama is a fantastic public speaker, but when he opens his mouth, all of his accolades prior to are irrelevant. If he sucks on stage, he sucks on stage. And the fact that he did a bunch of good things beforehand are meaningless. We are only as good as the things that are coming out of our mouths at the moment we're speaking. So when I hear these people take a stage and they get like, I counted, or I timed it once, 217 seconds were spent on telling us about this person, this vice president of marketing, who we all know already, by the way, because you're speaking to your own people and you get a 217-second introduction that ultimately is meaningless, because if you suck, you suck. And nobody will listen to you, regardless of your title or what your introduction is, which is why I love an introduction that is short and basically says, here's Matt. Like, what did I tell you today? Like, when Ben got on the call, he said, how you doing, Matt? Here's what happened to me today. When I was walking to my studio, I didn't bother to turn on the light and I walked into the wall. I fell down and nearly knocked myself out. And then I managed to pick myself up, come over to this desk and begin this call. That's the best introduction I could have ever got. If Ben had said, this is Matthew Dix. About 10 minutes ago, he basically knocked himself out walking into a wall in a home he's lived in for 15 years because he's an idiot. But I have brought him in to speak to us today, so hopefully he's better than he was 10 minutes ago. That would be the intro I would go for every single time, because that's an intro that makes people laugh, indicates self-deprecation, right? Puts people in the right mood. So we're only as good as what we have to say, and we have to be human beings when we say it. So that's what I'm always pushing people to do.
どうもありがとうございます。Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, my head still hurts, legitimately.
Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah. First of all, thanks. My first day here. So pumped to meet everybody. So a question I have for Matthew is, I noticed that as you were kind of bringing us into the moments where you're discovering stories as they're happening for you, is you started relating them, kind of post story to something bigger. Can you walk us through your process for like when you discover a story or when you experience a story, and then how you relate that to something interesting? Because some of the stories you shared are relatively mundane, right? Oh, I walked into a wall, you know what I mean? Or I stubbed my son stumbled into the room, like relatively simple, but you connected it to these themes, which made them a lot more memorable. So can you walk us through going from just a random story to now connecting it to these themes?
Yeah, I mean, what I basically do is when I finish the Charlie story about finding the baseball bat and saying thanks, Dad, and leaves the room, my thought is, first of all, will that make a good story for a stage? Or is that a story I'm just going to tell my wife? And I was like, oh, that's a good story for the stage. I decide that it's a story worth telling human beings who don't care about me, which is sort of the measure, right? Whether you're good or not. We tell most of the stories we tell in our lives to our friends and family, so they don't often criticize us. So we think we're better than we really are. The only way you know if you're good is if you stand in front of 500 people and tell a story and see how they react. The reaction will tell you instantly if you're doing a good job or not. So I ask myself, is that story worth telling to other human beings other than the people I love? And if it has relatability, it's going to work for me. So in my mind, I think to myself, well, what's relatable about that? Or is it just sort of like a me story? And I go, oh, it is relatable because parents have to like keep their kids safe. And parents have to make that decision over how dangerous do we tell our children the world really is. When they're 5, we don't tell them anything. When they're 18, we let them know before they go off to college a whole bunch of things that we wish we didn't have to tell them, right? And I'm in the middle place right now. I got a 12-year-old boy. So I'm like I have to calculate constantly what I want him to know, what I don't want him to know. I said to myself in the shower, that's pretty relatable. People are going to understand that. Like, even if you don't have kids, you're going to remember the moment when your parents told you, like, if you drink too much at college and you wander outside your dorm with people you don't know, bad things are going to happen, right? That we all have had those moments in our lives. So then I decide it's relatable. So then it's reached the level of I get to tell other people. And then my next thought is there a theme, meaning, or message in this story that can apply to business or work or teaching 5th graders, which I still do, right? Can I tell my 5th graders this is a means of making long division seem more interesting, which is literally a question I ask myself all the time. And in that case, I said to myself, well, that baseball bat represents me keeping him safe. And as soon as I said to myself, keeping him safe, I went, oh, my cybersecurity company keeps people safe. If I was working with a lock company, I would have also said, oh, this works well for my lock company, right? If I was working for the police, I would say, oh, I could use this with police officers. Like, they are the bat under the bed, except they're in a car waiting to come to my help. I would just be thinking in that regard. So I'm always asking myself, what is the theme, meaning, or message of this story? And is it relatable beyond my life? Can I extend it into some of the work that I'm doing? And if I can, then I have a story that I can share in that bigger stage. I do like, though, I'll tell you, my favorite stories are the small stories. I have really ridiculous stories. I've died twice and been brought back to life by CPR both times, obviously. I've been arrested and tried for a crime I didn't commit. I spent a period of my life homeless. I've been the victim of 2 really violent crimes. Those are stories I've told before, but the stories I love are the stories where a 12-year-old boy falls into a bedroom, finds a bat under the bed, because that's much more relatable. If I tell you the story of going through a windshield head first and dying on the side of the road, probably no one on this call is going, yeah, I've been through that, Matt. It really does suck. I did that myself once, right? That's not a story that relates very easily. I can make it relatable, but it's a heavier lift. Whereas if I have a simple little story, everyone gets it. And I think there's enormous power in taking a small moment and making it a big idea, taking the small moment and extending it to a big idea. So I'm always looking to do that. So don't discount your stories as being too small. The small ones have the most power, I often think. Another very long answer. I apologize.
My favorite was how you learned how to do a split.
Oh, no, not a split, a backbend.
A backbend, got it.
Yeah, I have a picture of that backbend on my home screen. I just opened it right now. There's a picture of me doing the backbend because I keep it on my desktop. Whenever I'm feeling like, I don't know if I can get this done, I open up the picture and I show the picture of the backbend. Yeah, so it's I'm looking at it right now. I can't believe I did a backbend. But it has total relatability to lots of things, right? Some students encouraged me to do a backbend, which if I stood up, you would say that's not going to really happen for you, Matt. You're 53 and you've never done one before. There's no way you could possibly do a backbend. And yet these two insufferably enthusiastic young ladies at recess one day taught me how to do a backbend, and I actually did it. And it was one of those moments where I realized we tell kids they can do anything, and yet we fail to live that same mantra. I said to myself, I can't do a backbend, even though they were saying, yes, you can do a backbend. And I'm like, damn it, I told them they can do anything. And now they're telling me I can do anything, but I know that's not possible. And then I discovered it was possible. And I was like, damn, like we can do more than I thought we could. And then I would say to myself, where's the theme, meaning, a message in that? It's pretty inspirational. I could use it in a TED talk. I could use it with my students. I could use it with parents. I don't know the business application yet, but I'm sure I could find one. Yeah. Glad you know that story, Ben. Thanks for bringing it up.
David Momano, do you want to go next? Oh wow, the voice is completely gone. I'm failing at this one, Matthew.
Quite all right.
You're sounding like an incredible DJ. So
Uh-huh.
I like it.
I used to be a DJ. Yeah.
Me too. Me too. Well, thank you, Matthew. Appreciate everything that you're doing. Like Ben and maybe some others, I think Andrew as well. I do a podcast. And, always the best interviews are when you could really just get the incredible stories out of the guest, right? Sometimes there's laughs, sometimes there's tears. When you're getting them to be vulnerable, right? How great is that? And maybe you get them to tell a story they've never told before in public, right? That's always the best, right? Do you have some go-to questions that you ask to elicit stories from people that kind of like quote unquote work every time?
I do. I work with attorneys. I was working with attorneys one day in Vermont. They were bringing their witnesses in so that I could help their witnesses sort of tell better stories on the stand. And in the process of working with them, I was gathering more content than the attorneys had gathered. I was getting more information. And this guy, Drew, says, how are you doing that? And I said, I don't know. Write down what I say. We'll analyze it later. So that's literally what we did. And so Drew wrote down what I said, and he discovered I do a couple things. He said, I speak less than they do. They take a line and their questioning tends to follow that line. So I tend to ask questions that are much more open-ended. So I'm not asking anything that's leading to anything specific. So I would not say, so Matt, you work with Amazon. How did that happen? Right? Instead, I would say, so Matt, somehow you managed to get into the world of business. Can you tell us something about that? Something about that invites me to say how it started, what happened yesterday, or something in between. So you give more latitude to the person. The other thing that Drew noticed was at some point in every conversation, I'm listening to what they're saying, and I always tell them a story that contains vulnerability, because once you're vulnerable, other people will be vulnerable. But here's the trick. I don't content match. So if you were to tell me a story about being in a car accident, I would not follow up with a story about my car accident, because that doesn't express empathy. That's content matching, and it really sounds like you're one-upping someone or you're trying to one-up someone. So what I do is I listen for theme, meaning, and message. So if someone tells me about their car accident, if Ben says I was in a car accident with my kids and I really got scared because I never saw it coming, and I've got two kids in the back and both of them were terrified and I was as afraid as they were, I'm listening to that and I'm thinking in my head, Ben is talking about how the world feels less certain to him than it did a minute ago. Like that car accident made him realize the world is more dangerous than he thought it was. So instead of telling a car accident story to follow up his, I would tell about a moment in my life when I discovered the world was less safe than I thought it was as well, right? Where, wow, peril can just sort of hurl out of the side of an intersection and really threaten my family at any time. And by doing that, we express empathy because we're not matching content, we're matching emotion, meaning we're listening strategically to what the person is saying on the below level. There's the story level, but then there's the what they're saying below the story. And I'm always listening for the underneath. And when you can match underneath, people feel like they know them, that you trust them, that they can trust you, and then they share more stories that way. So I do those things. Don't talk so much. I say a lot of uh-huh and yes, so those little fillers that just encourage people to keep speaking. But my favorite question that I love to ask people is I say, don't tell me what you do. Instead, tell me how you ended up doing what you do. Because that is often a more interesting story. If you say, what did you do? There's a finite answer to the question often. But when you say, how did you end up doing the thing you do? It's automatic suspense because you still don't know what they did. And if they're a good storyteller, they're going to lead to it. That's going to feel like a great story. But the story is always better about how you got the job than what the job actually is. So be looking for helping people to tell processes rather than answering finite questions. How did you get there? So you're married to Alicia. Tell me about how you fell in love with her, right? That's a better question than sort of like, tell me about your wedding day. Right. So asking a journey question is better than that singular question. Does that help at all?
No, tremendously. It leaves it backs it up a little bit and leaves it very open ended, which you're not framing anything, right? It's just kind of like they're going to start where they want to start, and you may get something out of them that you never even planned on asking, right?
Right. Yeah. Yes. Well, when Ben said let's just do a Q&A, I told him I love Q&A because I love not knowing what I'm going to say. And I often don't know what I know that is valuable to people unless I'm asked a question. So oftentimes we know stuff, but we don't know that like it's important to people. And maybe we're the only one who knows it, or we're one of a few people who know it. And the only way we can find that out is by having people ask us questions and then having the opportunity to formulate an answer in front of an audience. So I love, my dream in life would be to go do stand up where I stand on stage and I say, give me a word and let's see if I can be funny about it. Right now, that's a little arrogant and there's too much hubris in there. And it's an indication of how little I care about what other people think of me. But that would be the perfect stand-up situation would be you would say potato and I would have to see if I could be funny about a potato. I don't think anyone would ever put up with it, but that's my dream is I like to not know what I'm going to say next and have to put it together. And I think that's the best kind of interview is the one where they sort of, you don't know what's coming. And that's oftentimes surprising and wonderful.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. Thank you. No, very, very helpful. Appreciate it.
Great.
Abby, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thanks. So when you're coaching people who don't have that same level of confidence to just get up and do stand up on a random word, for instance, how do you coach people to have more confidence and more stage presence so they can be able to tell their stories in front of large groups?
I have been asked by 1 million people to teach them how to be confident, which is a very challenging thing. In terms of public speaking, I create metaphors for them. So I tell them that essentially public speaking is like going off a high dive. Even if you've seen 1,000 people go off the high dive, I did this as a kid. They had like a 14-foot high dive, which would definitely not be allowed today. It's probably very dangerous. But there was a 14-foot high dive at the public pool, and I would watch 1,000 kids go off it, and they all survived. And despite the fact that I watched them all do it and they all survived, the first time I did it was terrifying. And I had to stand on the end of the diving board, and I actually had to leap. And there's no way to take away that requirement of the first leap. You just have to acknowledge that 1 million people have done it before you and 1 million people will do it after you. So you're either the most rarest of unicorns who is going to somehow like melt into a puddle on stage and you're so special that you can't do it, or you're just like everybody else and it's just kind of hard and you have to go do it. The other thing is I've never been nervous on stage, so I'm sort of a monster in that regard. I'm not that hopeful. But my friend Jenny, who I torment constantly, she's a storyteller. And she's explained to me that about 80% of nervousness is pre-performance nervousness, meaning most of the nervousness you feel comes just before you begin speaking. And then as you begin speaking, most of it disappears. In the same way, once you jump off the diving board, you're really no longer nervous anymore because it's like 3 seconds and you hit the water and it's all over, right? It's the jump that's the hardest and the climb up the ladder and the walk across the diving board. It's the same thing with public speaking. It's the 3 weeks before and the practice and the thinking about it and the preparation and the mic check. All of that is the thing that creates most of the nerves. Once you start speaking, most of those nerves will disappear. And that is for everyone. So knowing that what you're feeling now is not what you'll feel when you're speaking can be really helpful to people. But ultimately, I have to get people to do it. And then I have to get people to record it. And then we can give feedback on it because you only remember the bad things. And in business, weirdly, positive feedback is not something a lot of businesses understand the value of. I actually had a vice president of a very large company that you have assuredly touched today already. I gave her positive feedback on her speech, and she said to me, "You don't need to compliment me. Just tell me what needs to be improved." And I said, positive feedback is designed to tell you what you're doing well, so you continue to do it well, and maybe you do it even more consistently. Positive feedback is a means of changing behavior in a meaningful way. And she said to me when we were done, she said, "I've never thought of it that way. I think I'm going to deal with my people differently now, because I always tell them what they're doing wrong. And I've never thought about like telling them what they do well so they keep doing it well." And I've heard that from many, many people. I think because I'm an elementary school teacher, that's why I understand that if I tell a kid something they're doing well, they will continue to do that thing well. In fact, here's a trick as a parent. You can tell a kid that they're doing something well that they've never done before, and then they will begin to do it well because they will not realize they've never done it before. I do this to students all the time. I'll say like, "I love the way that you washed your hands before you came out of the bathroom there." And they'll be like, "Oh, thanks." And then they just start washing their hands because they've received positive feedback on something they didn't even do. But because they got positive feedback, they will now begin to do it, which is insane, but true. And it works with adults too. So I don't know if I actually answered your question either, because I'm constantly blabbering on. I did. It's really hard to get rid of the nerves though, but knowing it's preemptive nerves helps a lot. And then you got to make the leap. The more you do it, the less nervous you become, or you become a monster like me and you're never nervous. Probably not the best way to go.
All of us are going to be studying this replay. That'll go out later today. What is the one best way that we can continue to support you, Matthew?
Well, you can go to MatthewDix.com and find all of my stuff there. You can, if you really want to support me, you should buy like a dozen of my books. You don't actually need to read them. You just need to buy a stack, and then I'm happy. But you can go to MatthewDix.com. You can go to Storyworthy.com if you're interested in storytelling. I have lots of free resources there. I have courses you can purchase. There's a free academy you can join and begin taking lessons virtually with me, those kinds of things. So MatthewDix.com, Storyworthy.com. Check out my books. And I did pull this up for you. So here is me doing a backbend. If you can see that there, that's me doing a backbend, which I look at all the time when I'm worried that I might not accomplish a goal. I say I did that, and therefore I can do anything. So.
Love it. Before we take off, everyone unmute, and let's give our guest a round of applause.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the questions. Much appreciated. I really enjoyed the questions. Really good questions. A question tells you more about a person than the answer, I got to tell you. So your questions were very insightful and thoughtful. Bravo.
Thanks so much. We'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.